Hello, I'm Ajahn Palo. Welcome to Sauntering into Silence. This week, Ajahn Sona did a tea time for the community, and we were able to ask him a lot of questions, and a fair number of them ended up being around using camping and being outdoors as a spiritual practice. Now, I found this, really valuable for what Mitch and I are planning to do. And I also have an idea to interview Ajahn Sona about how to use the upcoming Sierra trip to, the best of my ability. And I also want to contact one of my Catholic friends and mentors, Father William, and see what he would recommend doing. Also, a Dharma Master, Reverend Hung Sure, who's both Father William and Dharma Master have been part of what's called a monastic interreligious dialogue. Uh, they're both sort of like the head representatives of both the Buddhist and the Christian part of that. So I wanted to get their take on that as well, and possibly even my teacher, Ajahn Pasano. So this is either one part or two-part series here about just the discussion with Ajahn Sona. If I do it as a one part, it'll be quite long, but I think it's really valuable.
Camping can be done in a lot of different ways. But there's a kind of a spiritual practice. So if you can't, going to monasteries is good too, but there's another way of doing it. And especially if you're a meditator and it's become a way of life for you and you want to just get out of the city so you can go off into the forest. Most people, the idea of camping is they have a big tent. They drive to a campsite and put up a big tent and they bring the kids and there's all kinds of marshmallow roast and this and that. That's not the kind I'm talking about. This is wandering around in nature, away from, specific campsites or anything like this. This is just camping in the forest. And the day, there's a couple of things you can do. You can, if you want to just go to a central place and set up a camp and then just meditate there, that's fine. The other way is to just walk every single day, and you walk most of the day. Canada is a fantastic place for just wandering the woods, just unbelievable stretches of forest that are just, they're not anything, they're not parks or anything, they're just there, And then you got to learn how to do this, and it's about, it's mostly learning to deal with the weather, the climate, and how to be, and this is not about comfort necessarily, but it's not also about, you're not trying to test yourself. It's kind of the middle path. You're not taking, this is what happens. So if you're a meditator, you might have a better chance with this, but you're sensory deprived. And now, so this is what a monastery will do to you as well. A certain amount of sensory deprivation, craving for ordinary sensory stimulation. So you can work through that by doing a lot of camping. And it's good to find out about yourself. Like, can you just take food that is just meant to keep you going? It's not disgusting or anything, but it's not exciting or not to your preferences. It's just keeps you going. And you don't, no entertainments, no books, no music, no anything. Just go out there and see what it's like to be without sensory experience, except for that of nature, what is trees and so forth. And at first, of course, if you're in the city and haven't been out there, it's quite an overwhelming experience to be in the forest. It's just like, wow, look at the moss, the trees, oh, there's a squirrel, yeah. And it's quite exciting for the first day or 2 days, and then, it's just trees and moss, the same thing. So it starts to, just fade into the background, because the nature is not high stimulation. And that's why the Buddha advised monks, go to the forest, monks. practice in the forest, live in the forest, stay in the forest, because it's a non-human environment. It's not constructed. You don't see the marks of human mind activity. It's devoid of that. It has no social structure to it. And it's also, it's a sensory experience, but it's a low sensory experience, especially after you get used to it. Yeah.
Where Mitch and I are going to go camping, the very first place on our trip is it's kind of all above tree line.
Mm.
And Ajahn Sona pointed out something I loved, which was the boulders there are completely takes you out of any human scale. Because you look at some of these boulders, and you know, some pictures, and it look like that could be, size of a vehicle. It's actually the size of this house.
Yeah.
And you have no reference when you're kind of walking through that. It takes you completely out of the personal realm.
Yeah, and it can take you into magic land as well. It's playing on a different part of your mind that frees it up for other types of experiences. If your mind is always in the social structure with people and ideas, it won't access some special states that require a lot of non-social, non-human stuff. You just amongst these biological beings and stones and earth and so forth, water, that allows a certain other part of your mind to, especially if you stay there long enough. So you'll start to get thoughts that you wouldn't have had. You'll get ideas about what you want to do with your life and all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't normally get. You won't have access to. That can happen. So when you go on a retreat, a long 10-day retreat, something, this interruption in the ordinary life is kind of important. And a lot of people are afraid of it. Terrified of, a lot of people don't handle unemployment well at all. It's a terrifying experience. They're at home. They don't know what to do with themselves because they've never even tried to think of what would I do except for go to work, so they have no skills for that. They have no preparation. So, but that's an important experience, especially if it's deliberate. If you deliberately try to do this, deprive yourself of this endless activity, and then the meaning of life and all of this stuff starts to well up. So that's one of the functions you can do with camping. But it's a skill, an experience, and also it's about the mind. So when your mind is okay with absolute simplicity, bare necessities, listen to the song, you are in a much more independent human. You're not terrified of things. You're much more resilient and available to deal with various situations in life. Yeah.
So, John, I'm going to ask, when Mitch and I have an interview with you, more about, we're going to be going on 4 or 5 day outings. Some of them will be backpacking, like you were saying. Some we're just going to go set up a base camp and meditate and just, explore a smaller area. How would you recommend for people here, taking an afternoon and going for a walk? How should they use that?
Well, try not to go exercising or with determination or something like that. See if you can just ramble and amble and not have I'm going to try to get my 10,000 steps in and I'm going to raise my heartbeat to this and that, and just stop with all of this excuses for rambling around. Just ramble. Don't walk more than 50 feet in a straight line. If there's a path, it's a cow path up the side, go up the cow path and watch how they make paths. They're geniuses for making paths. They never step over something, they just go around it. It's the most interesting and beautiful. Follow their wending, their path. The word weird is actually a form of winding, like wending a path. A path, the word weird means that it moves and flows. So a person who's weird is one who sort of flows their own way, the path, not going a straight line, but weird their way through something, go walk a little more, less straight, You'll find yourself, it's hard to get out of the destination, the goal. Where's my goal? What's my goal? This and that. Instead of just ambling, sit, stare, whatever, as long as you feel like it, just stop that goal kind of stuff, just see how you are with that.
When I first got here and I started walking, I would just get in bliss being out there. And I was almost in tears too, because I was like, this is so simple to get. But yeah, I think so many people in the world just, they don't know how to get this feeling, and it's so simple to get. So I was almost sad, because like, how can I tell people how to do this? And then I told you this thing of just like, the trees were just like, it felt like they were running towards me. And you said, yeah, trees are like cats.
Yeah. Make the trees come to you. So it's like a cat. So when you want the cat doesn't want you. When you don't need the cat comes and sits on your lap. So when you're desperately going out into nature to console yourself, the trees run away. They don't like needy people. But when you're not needy and you go out there, the trees comb your hair as you walk under. They stroke your head. They want to sit close to you. They're all warm and smiling because they like people who are content and happy. So that's nature. The whole thing will become, if you're unwell, if you're alienated, nature is alien. It's grim. It wants to kill you. When you're back on earth, you're part of the earth, you're at ease in nature, you're not pondering what's the meaning of life, it's all gone, then trees just love you. The nature is warm and supportive, but it's the background. It likes you now, as it seems. So this is your subjective experience of the world is the world. There isn't a world outside of that. And how you feel is going to create the world that you live in. And it'll be either friendly and warm and or alien, empty, cold, meaningless. It's not the world, it's you, but that world, you can't separate. You are the maker of a world. You are a world system walking around. And you change your mind like this, and you're in a different world. Yeah. So part of that endless, years and years of process of going out there is part of that finally finding yourself at ease in the world, That's the process, I mean, Ajahn Chah would say that Dhamma is everywhere. It's everywhere. But it's not everywhere until you start to get the idea. But the Buddha, you see the life of the Buddha, you see he goes off, leaves the kingdom, leaves the palace, goes off into the forest, finds these guys that are super ascetics, damn near starves themselves to death. They believe painful practices are the way, etc. And then he's doing very badly, just about dying from starvation and bad practices, and finally just stops it. He goes and gets under a tree, out of the heat of the sun, by a river. And so he's being kind to himself for the first time. He says, "This can't be the way. This is inhuman. This is not human." So, and then he starts thinking about loving kindness, and the breath. And somebody comes along and gives him some food as well, some very nourishing food. And he accepts it because he says, I've been mistreating this body of mine. I mean, starving the thing. It needs food. So he gives it the food. He starts eating, and he takes care of his body. He gets in out of the blazing sun, a nice cool breeze, and then he starts remembering his childhood when he was surrounded by his aunts and people who cared about him, and he remembers going to samadhi, but with breath meditation as a child when he's like 7. And the scene is he's outside, and it's a plowing festival. The king makes the first plow furrow. It's like a symbolic thing for abundance and so forth. And he's there under a tree with his aunts and his cousins. They're all, of course, they love him, and it's a very loving, supportive feeling. It's just the joy of nature, of spring, the breeze against his skin. He goes into samadhi as a child, and now he remembers that. He makes the connection. He's being kind to himself. He's kind of treating himself like his own mother would, saying, "Now, dear, eat something. Good Lord, why don't be cruel." And then he does breath meditation. He gets enlightened because he goes into the breath meditation, gets samadhi, and that's a very pleasurable thing. By the way, he doesn't do vipassana. He does samadhi, because there's no such thing as vipassana. He hasn't invented Buddhism yet. And what does he say to himself? First of all, it's okay to eat. That starving is a terrible thing to do to yourself. It's okay to eat. And it's okay to get in out of the sun. And it's okay to feel the bliss of the breeze against your skin. And it's okay to feel the deep pleasure of this peace and serenity of the breath meditation. And he says to himself, this is a pleasure not to be feared. So he's been with a bunch of guys, like they're afraid of any kind of pleasure, any kind of pleasant feeling, any kind of eating. It's pain is the way. Pain is the way. And it's just to the death. And he's rejected that. He says, it's not the way. So it's that allowance of this, the pleasure of deep samadhi. It's the 8th factor of the path. He just goes into it, and out the other side he comes with his enlightenment. Wisdom naturally rises and follows the experience of samadhi. Why does it naturally rise and fall? Because he'd never thought of this before. He wasn't contemplating anything because he didn't know what to contemplate, because he didn't know what leads to enlightenment. So it must have come naturally to him and it did, out of samadhi, deep stillness and peace. His mind found the solution because it had been kindness, treated well. The body is now being treated with moderation, not punished. He's out of the sun. He's in nature. He is not afraid of the pleasure, the mental and emotional pleasure of this serenity. And the mind is now responding by finding the solution to his problems. What is his problem? His problem is the nature of suffering. So the mind is now in a super refined area. It goes and says, "Oh, I can find the solution to this. I know where to look now." So he comes back with the solution. He gets it. So then he has vipassana. He has clarity. The serenity and clarity have merged, and he comes up with a solution. But notice that he didn't come to it having heard the Dhamma before. He hadn't heard of the Four Noble Truths. He got it from samadhi, right? Samadhi is what delivered him into this stillness and clarity of the mind delivered him into wisdom. That process.
I don't know. I still think I'm going to make Mitch hike 30 miles a day and carry my pack for me. And
Feed him on oats only.
And peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
For the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities. That's why this bed can rest at ease. You bring the bare necessities of life. So just relax, yeah, in my backyard. If you act like the bee acts, you're working too hard. Don't spend your time looking around for something you want that can't be found. If you find out you can live without it, just go along and don't think about it. I tell you something true. The bare necessities of life will come to you.